Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is George Mullinax. George is owner of CMC Media and Marketing Group. They publish Cityscope and HealthScope magazines, among others. George, before I confirm I've never been featured on the cover of Cityscope due to my low Q score, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
I drink whatever it takes to get going in the morning.
Yeah? And what's that, coffee? Or?
Well, I'm kind of a boring guy. It's a decaf coffee.
Oh, I'm decaf.
Yeah, I'm all decaf, so I get up with enough energy to get going without the big boost. I do okay without it.
Can you tell the difference between decaf and caffeinated?
I think I can. I think I definitely can. Now,
really?
Everybody that's ever, provided me a cup of decaf will tell me that I'm crazy, but I swear there's a big difference. I love regular coffee compared to decaf, but I don't need the boost.
Yeah, I'm with you. I gave it up, probably 6 years ago now, maybe even more than that. But I can't tell the difference.
Yeah. Well, back, a few years ago, I'd have one, a couple in the morning, and I'd be supercharged by about 10 o'clock. Probably more so than I needed to be.
Well, knowing you the way I do, that's scary.
That's right. I don't necessarily need that.
No, I think you're doing okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, and obviously Cityscope and HealthScope in particular have such a strong presence in this community, and obviously what you've done with it over the last decade more has been tremendous. But I always like to start in the beginning. You were born in Baltimore, huh?
Yeah, I was born in Baltimore. Yeah, and I grew up in a suburb, Towson, Maryland, which is just outside of Baltimore. But that's where I spent the early part of my life.
Does Baltimore get a bum rap, or is it really as hard as people say?
I think Baltimore over the years has been a pretty tough city. It's a troubled city in many ways, but it's a great area in the country. It's a beautiful state. There's wonderful people there. But the downtown area, over the years has been tough. I think for the city and a lot of others that would go into the city and frequent it.
Well, we got a little taste of Baltimore here with the aquarium because it's the same designer who built that one.
That's right,
and they look similar.
Yeah, that's right. And that was a big part of the waterfront in Baltimore. They had that area developed into really an attraction for people coming in from outside the area, and the aquarium was a part of it. So, yeah, similar, very similar.
So, growing up, siblings?
Yeah, I grew up with two brothers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was three boys.
Oh, that had to be something.
Yeah, it was. And we were all back. My brother was a year behind me, and then another, my third brother's, I think, 2.5 years behind me. So,
so you're the oldest.
I'm the oldest, but we had quite the gang there growing up.
I bet you did. Did you terrorize the neighborhood?
I think we definitely had our moments where we were probably considered, a band of boys that needed to be in control. So we were three boys that enjoyed everything you could expect from three boys.
Yeah, and I'm sure sports played a big part in it.
Oh yeah, we all love sports. Yeah.
Yeah. What was your sport?
Well, I really gravitated to playing football and lacrosse. Up in that area, lacrosse is a hot sport, and so I gravitated to that. I loved both those sports, and played them in high school. Played lacrosse in college. It was a great time.
Were your parents athletic?
My dad was quite the athlete. He was a little All-American football player. Went to Johns Hopkins and was a little All-American when he was a junior. He's quite the football player, quite the athlete in general. He played basketball. He played baseball. So he was really quite the athlete.
But you picked up on some of that. Weren't you All-American lacrosse?
I was. In my junior year, I was nominated to the All-American team, and then in my senior year as well. At college, I was on the All-American team, yeah.
That's a heck of an achievement.
Well, it was fun, and I've made so many friends through that sport. And I still, I'll go back to Baltimore a few times a year and go back to my my college a couple times, off and on, and meet up with old guys that I played with, and it's just a terrific group of friends.
Yeah, that bond is always there.
It's amazing. Yeah, they're just great friends. When you pick up, you haven't seen them for 10 years, you pick up with them, it's like you just saw them yesterday. It's a wonderful experience.
That's one of the good things about the internet and social media today, too.
Yeah.
You know, you can really stay in touch with folks you knew 40 and 50 years ago.
Yeah. It's been terrific. I've had the opportunity to have so many wonderful friends here in Chattanooga, as well as, you know, in Maryland and other areas. It's been quite a ride.
Well, let's talk about how you grew up. You kind of in a family business, right?
Yeah. So when I you know, I was really young, my family owned a company called Becker Pretzel Bakeries, and we had two manufacturing plants. We had one in West Baltimore, and we had one in Columbia, Pennsylvania, which is between York and Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And that business was started by my great-grandfather. And then my grandfather took it over, and then my dad, who was a lawyer, a trained lawyer, he then took over the business. So as a youngster, our family owned that company, and they produced pretzels, potato chips, cheese curls, you name it. And we were sold in all the grocery stores. We had trucks on the street. We had people delivering our snacks to the grocery stores. You'd walk in the store, there'd be a 4-foot section of all of the Becker pretzels, potato chips, and all that. It was quite the business. And
would you and your brothers work in it as kids?
Well,
like sweeping the floors?
No, they take us to the factory to show it to us. I can remember going to the factory and all. I can just remember my dad saying, just don't put your hands in there. As they're twisted pretzels, they just kept saying you'll lose a finger if you put your hand in there. Don't, because we're little, we're like,
And you want to put your hand in there.
We wanted a pretzel, so a freshly baked pretzel. But I can remember that. I visited both plants, as a matter of fact, at one point in time. I remember that. So, but it was quite the business, and that was part of what we enjoyed when we were younger.
And as part of that, you had that entrepreneurial experience. And in talking to you previously and some of the notes I've got, your mom was really had an entrepreneurial bent, didn't she?
Yes, she did. It's when I look back on it, it's really fascinating. Her dad was a second generation in this pretzel and pretzel bakery business, and she went out of her way to try to teach us what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And one of the stories that I shared with you, which is pretty funny, is we lived on a just outside of a public golf course, and very close to the 8th hole. And my mom encouraged us to sell lemonade on the 8th hole. Now, the 8th hole was right before the turn where everybody would get to the snack shop.
Yeah.
So we would put lemonade in cups in our little wagon. We had a red wagon, and we would pull it through this pathway that would take us up to the 8th hole, where we sat right there at the tee box on the 8th hole.
Great.
And we would sell lemonade for like 25 cents or whatever.
So you'd undercut their price.
Well, yeah, we just were selling whatever we could sell. And of course, these guys would come around to the 8th hole, and they'd see 3 boys, 6, 7, 8, whatever, sell a lemonade.
Of course, they're going to buy from
you.
you.
So they're buying 25, 50-cent cups of lemonade. Well, we were selling so much that the snack shack on the turn at the 10th started to complain to the general manager that there's guys out there on the 8th hole that are selling drinks.
6, 7, 8-year-old boys,
and they're not buying our drinks here. So the general manager came out on 2 or 3 occasions and said, "You got to get off the golf course." So we would take our little red wagon and we'd pull it back home, and we'd say to our mom, "We just got kicked off the golf course." So anyway, that was a great lesson. But she would say, "Okay, so let's talk about what you just made. What's your profit?"
Yeah.
So, hey, we made like $5. We're pumped up. She goes, "Well, wait a minute. How much was the lemonade mix?" We're like, "What do you mean the lemonade mix?"
I got it out of the cabinet.
She said, "You got to include that to figure out what your profit is."
Yeah.
And we were dumbfounded. We were like, "Well, I thought we'd just go get the lemonade mix." But anyway, that was one of our first experiences and learnings about what it's like to be an entrepreneur. That was a little red wagon on the 8th hole before the turn.
That's
Pine
great.
Ridge Golf Course.
I love that. Talk about placement, man. You guys were in the right spot at the right time, and you send 3 cute little boys out there to sell it.
And I'll tell you one other story that I didn't tell you, but the other thing about what we used to do is we used to have a little raft. It was a wooden raft that we would float out in the lake. And the 8th hole, you had to hit over the lake to get on the green. Well, invariably, people would hit their balls into the lake, right?
Yeah.
And we had our wooden little raft out there, so we sat there, and if somebody hit their ball into the lake, we would go get the ball. And so when we had enough balls, we would take the balls, and we'd go back up to the top at the 8th hole, and we'd sell the balls to golfers coming around the turn. So it was quite the story.
George, you're a hustler. So was growing up, you weren't working in the family business at that point, but you were working summer jobs and things like that, because we've got one in common.
Yeah.
Dishwasher.
Well, yeah. I mean, I worked at the restaurant in the restaurant industry, and one of the stories about working in the restaurant is my mom encouraged my brother and I to work in the restaurant industry to help out his busboys, and I was practicing football. I couldn't make it in the afternoon, so my brother right behind me, who looked very much like me, she said, "Why don't you do this? You go in, and then your brother will come in at 7:00 and replace you." And so she encouraged me to do that without telling the restaurant owner. So, my brother goes in there and he's a busboy, and I go in at like 7:00, and he sneaks out the side door, and I sneak in the side door, and the waitresses are saying, "Go get the black coffee," and I'm like, "Where's the black coffee?" and they're like, "You need to bus number 2," and I'm like, "Where's number two?" Well, finally the restaurant manager comes up to me and he goes, "Who are you?"
How long did you do this?
Oh, that was the first night. But then, so the manager was so struck by our entrepreneurial spirit, or our willingness to take a risk like that, to come in. He said, "Okay, you guys can keep doing this." So, but the first time around, he was like, "Wait a minute." Did
you at least dress alike?
Yeah, we had to dress in their.
Oh, okay. So you had
a bow tie. So we had black pants on, a white shirt, and a black bow tie. So my brother goes out, I come in.
Oh God, that's a sitcom routine.
Oh my gosh! So the waitresses are like, "You got to be kidding me!" And of course, they're trying to hustle their tips, and I'm like, "Where's table number 2?"
So you got this entrepreneur spirit at a very young age.
Yes, without not knowing what it was all about. I sure did. I learned a lot from my mom, and she was a risk taker.
Yeah. Now, the other story I wanted you to touch on because I want to go back to the Becker pretzel bakeries, but before we do, one of your summer jobs was walking the horses in the paddock at Pimlico, which is the second leg of the Triple Crown.
That's right. So our neighbor, a guy next to us, his name was Frank Christmas, and he raised horses to race. Mm-hmm. And he raced in Maryland, and he raced up in New Jersey. And believe it or not, his wife was named Mary Christmas. True story. And so
I got to do better background checks. I'm not believing any of this.
No, this is a true story. So they were pretty. If you can imagine horse people, they're pretty tough. I mean, and Mary was a pretty tough lady.
Oh, that's a tough business.
I mean, we're talking about horses and farms and you name it. And so she was talking to my mom and her thought it would be a good idea for us to learn what it's like to get up early and work early, and what it's like to be involved with racehorses. So my mom insisted that I walk racehorses at Pimlico, and before I went to school. So on a couple of occasions, I can't remember how many, I got up early and she drove me to Pimlico, where I would walk these racehorses. Now I'm like 12 years old, 13 years old. I'm like a tenth of the size of these racehorses.
Oh, they're monsters.
And they're very high strung. Yeah. So meanwhile, the stable hands were coaching me. Well, the first thing they tell you is don't resist. Well, I'm thinking that's a good thing because this horse is going to whip me through the ceiling. So don't resist, and because they'll rear up. So I'm walking these horses and they're rearing up, and I'm walking through what and whatever could be around the stable. And I did that for an hour or so, and then I went home, got dressed and went to school. So I think the lesson learned there was what it's like to get up early and work long hours.
How early were you having to get up to do that?
I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning.
So doing that before school?
Before school, walking horses.
What was the most famous horse you ever walked? Any idea?
I don't know. At that point in time,
So you didn't have Secretariat?
No, I didn't have Secretariat. I can't remember. They weren't in the big leagues. They were racing at like Pimlico before the big races. So
Yeah.
I didn't have any big stars, but I think it was more self-preservation that I was concerned about at that point in time.
Yeah, because you literally could be killed.
Yeah. Yes. But, I think my mom was really, very determined to make sure we knew what it's like to have to go out and, get up early and work long hours if you have to.
So was your mom's entrepreneur spirit because it was her grandfather and father who started the bakery?
I think so. I mean, looking back on it now, I think that's what it was. I mean, I'm sure her dad probably would talk to her about things associated with taking risk and working hard. So I think that kind of carried forward to us. My grandfather died before I really knew him, but I think that's what it was.
Yeah. Then, and talk a little bit about the bakery and what happened to that.
So it was quite a part of my life story. In 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated and terribly assassinated, and there were uprisings in large cities across the country, and Baltimore was one of them where there was a terrible uprising, and we had our plant in West Baltimore, and when the riots broke out, the plant was burned to the ground. And I'll never forget, I was watching the news with my mom, and I was probably 13 at the time, and there was a news flash, and it said 13 alarm fire at Becker Pretzel Bakery.
Oh, wow.
And the film comes on and shows the plant burning to the ground, and my mom was just devastated. I mean, that was her family business.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. She just sat there and wept, looking at the news. So unfortunately, I think due to the fact that it was burned down to the ground due to social unrest, insurance was not going to cover it.
And I don't think a lot of people realize that insurance won't cover something like that.
Yeah. So the business was lost. It was done for. I mean, that was it. It never recovered. And
so what did that do to your family? I mean, you have this family business that's provided for now going into your third generation.
Yeah.
And what's the future?
So that's exactly right. So my dad had to find a new job, and he was probably in his 40s at the time, early 40s is my guess. And then my mom had to get a job.
Yeah.
And, because that was a business that ultimately could have been sold. That could have been sold. They could have made a tremendous amount of profit probably. But but that didn't happen. So my mom started to be a school teacher and a realtor. Wow. And so at an early age, now reflecting back on it as an older adult, I saw firsthand what it's like to be a business owner in terms of the prosperity and even the glamour to some extent. I mean, you'd walk into a grocery store and there's a whole section with Becker all over it, and people are like, "That's his family," you know what I mean? To nothing.
Yeah,
it's gone. I mean, the whole thing is gone. And and in business, when you take risk, and you're the one that's involved with the business, you can thrive and you can dive.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular case,
and it can happen overnight.
And it can happen, and it can be things that you don't have control over.
Yeah.
And which in this case, that's what it was. So so it was like a restart. And
how did your parents handle that? Now, I understand your dad had to get a new job, so he was a lawyer. Did he go into law? Or?
No, he ended up taking a job with another food company
because that's what he had been doing.
Yeah, that's what he'd been doing. And my mom was, she went back and was teaching school. She was teaching at a Catholic school, as a matter of fact. And I used to think to myself, because she was pretty lively, and I used to think to myself, how the hell did she get a job at a Catholic school?
Those are the best Catholic schools.
I was like, I don't know. I mean, she must have been a great talker, because I don't know how she got a job teaching at a Catholic school.
Oh, that's
she
funny.
did, but
so did that affect them? I know it affected them. You lose the business, but was there bitterness moving forward, or was it, okay, we've been dealt this?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it pretty much split the family up.
Oh.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was a very difficult thing for our family. But, we went on and, and we made everything work. And I was still fortunate enough to go to a really good, school. My brothers and I went to a really good school, which is really, really an amazing school for us. And then we went on our way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where'd you go to college?
So I went to a school called Washington College. down in Chestertown, Maryland, and I think it was named after George Washington. I think it was one of the first schools to be founded in our country. It was in 17 something. I'm not sure what, but it was a small liberal arts school, and but it had a great lacrosse team.
Yeah,
and I knew about that. So I went there along with a lot of other guys from the Baltimore area that played that sport, and we had great teams, and it was really a wonderful experience, the school and as well as playing sports there.
What were you majoring in?
So I majored in history. I really didn't know what I wanted to major in, honestly. I just decided that I was going to major in history. I enjoyed history, and so I majored in history, but I think I really majored more in playing lacrosse than I did history. But, and I got out of school and I started to look for employment and decided I was going to go back to school to get my master's, my MBA. And I remember talking to the dean at the University of Baltimore about, about getting into the program. And he looked at my transcripts from Washington College.
He said, "You're a great lacrosse player, George."
He said, well, look, you can get in the program, but here's the thing. You're going to have to go back and take 2 years of undergraduate classes because you don't have the credits that you need to get into the MBA program. So if you want to do it, you're going to have to go back to school for 2 years, night school. I was like,
in addition to getting your MBA.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, so I'm looking at the dean going, "You sure about that?" So that's what I did. I went back to school at night for 4 years, and I got I don't know how many undergraduate credits that I needed to get into the school, and then I went for another 2 years to get my master's. But I did that while I worked. I did it at night, and I would go to class during the week, and I'd study on the weekends.
You were working also?
Mm-hmm.
What were you doing?
So I at that point in time, I was working for M&M Mars, and I was a salesperson for them. So I was selling, and I actually had a job too where I was responsible for merchandisers for a period of time in the Baltimore, York, Pennsylvania, Lancaster area. So I was working for them.
So that puts you on the road, though, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
So you're selling, and you got a territory.
Yeah.
And you're doing undergraduate work, and you're doing MBA work.
Right. And there was no virtual at that point in time.
Right.
So I had to have my schedule set up.
How'd you do it?
Well, I'd be back for classes on Wednesday. So I would take 2 classes on Wednesday night, and then I might take another class on Thursday. I'm not sure. I think I was taking 2 classes a semester. And then I was doing summer school. Summer school, you could knock out the classes pretty quick. So I was doing summer school.
So not only how did you do it, but why did you do it? Why was that important to you?
So I really felt like if I was going to compete for the types of jobs that I wanted to be involved with, I would need to do that. I just felt like I needed to have a better understanding of different things associated with business to really be successful. And I really my aspirations were high. I really wanted to grow with a large food company and be successful. So I just felt like I had to do it.
And why stay in the food business?
So my mom was obviously she grew up through the Great Depression. And she was the one where we'd go out to get something to eat, and she'd like take all the salt, sugar, and pepper and put it in her purse. I'm like, "Mom, that's not yours."
Right.
Well, they're free, so we need them. So she'd be the one, or if it was mayonnaise packages or ketchup packages, she's taking that. But that's what they grew up in. And she would said to me, "You need to work in the food business because everybody eats food."
That's pretty astute.
And it's a safe bet. The chances of you losing your job in the food business is low, and they have great benefits. She's telling me that when I'm in my late teens, early 20s. So that's what I did. I started looking for a job with a food company. I didn't know any better. And so my first job was with McCormick and Company out of Baltimore.
The Spice People.
The Spice People. And I wanted to work for them in Baltimore, but they wanted me to work in Pennsylvania, Reading, Pennsylvania. So that's what I did. I went up there, and my first job was basically stocking shelves in stores up there. I was responsible for a small warehouse that served a group of stores called Redner's Markets, and I sold displays of pepper and all these spices, and I did that for a year, and then ended up eventually working for M&M Mars out of Baltimore.
Did your mom give the same advice to your brothers? Did they get into the food business?
You know what? No, I'm sure she did. But my brother behind me, he worked for Time Magazine up in New York.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And my other brother, he ended up being a salesperson in Baltimore. He sold tires his whole career. Mm-hmm. He still is selling tires in Baltimore.
It sounds like your mother had a tremendous influence over your not just your career path, but the whole entrepreneurial spirit.
Oh, absolutely. She was, looking back on it, she was definitely teaching us lessons, and she definitely made her points.
Yeah.
She definitely made her feelings known in terms of what she thought we needed to do.
She wasn't shy.
Not at all.
So you get out of school, you got your undergraduate, you go back and you take the remedial, like a better term, remedial classes.
Yeah, right.
And you got your MBA, and that's when you went to work for McCormick?
Actually, I when I came back from work for McCormick is when I started with M&M Mars. That's when I started going to school. So
okay.
I think I spent 1 year stocking shelves.
Yeah.
Running a warehouse. It was, which was as hot as could be. I'm stocking stuff and I'm loading stuff up. But I thought, I don't want to do this my whole career. So I need to do more to be prepared for other jobs and to be able to compete. Even so that when I go to interview for a job, I can say, hey, look, I'm doing this, I'm getting my master's. And I felt like it was necessary to get, opportunities. So that's what I did.
Did you was that influenced by running into a situation where they said you weren't qualified?
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a lady that I went to college with. Her name was Michelle Williams, and she worked for a recruiting firm. And she set me up with interviews with Quaker Oats at the time and Procter & Gamble. And I didn't get past first base. I was not prepared at all in terms of how to interview. No one really coached me on how to interview. And I just, I started, the questions that I was fielding, I never thought through. I never had, I never had anybody say, here's what you need to do, and you need to think about to be prepared for these interviews. These are the types of questions people are going to ask, and for you to compete, you need to be able to respond to these types of questions. So I didn't get past first base with some really good companies that I really wanted to work with. They were great companies. And I actually at college also interviewed with IBM at one point in time, which was like I had no reason to be interviewing for IBM whatsoever at college, and that didn't get past first base.
Well, and that's particularly when IBM was at their zenith in terms of the place to work.
So they say to me, so tell me about your college career, and I love lacrosse.
Well, George, we don't have a lacrosse team.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time.
Were you that ambitious? And I'm asking this in terms of because some people could have that wall come up and say, "Look, you're not getting past first," and they just go, "Okay, that's not meant for me. I don't want to do that." What spurred you on to say, "You know what? I better get myself better prepared."
I just felt like. I don't know. Maybe it was all of what I learned growing up as a kid. You gotta buckle up sometimes and push forward. And I felt like I had to be more prepared than I was to compete for positions. By the way, this was taking place in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And this is when the economy was performing very poorly. Yeah. Inflation was high. I think gas went over $1 for the first time, and people were going crazy about that.
Home loan rates were like 17, 18%, and we're complaining about 6%.
Exactly.
Now.
And the first place that I bought a home, I bought a row home in Baltimore with 14%. So anyway, the economy's not great. There's not a lot of jobs. Competition's high, and I'm striking out.
Yeah.
So I thought I've got to go back to school.
I think that's an important part on the economy. We kind of take for granted now that there's a labor shortage all the time now. And back in the late 70s, early 80s, man, getting hired coming out of school was an accomplishment in itself.
Well, and my first job, and when I went to work for McCormick, it was my territory was down by Lancaster and in that area. Lidditz, Pennsylvania. That's Amish country.
Yeah.
And invariably, I'd be behind coach, being driven by 3 or 4 Amish people with horses, and I'm trying to get to my next store, and I'm thinking, this is absurd. I can't get around these people. So that was one part. Then the other part was I would go up to a place called Shamokin, Pennsylvania, and Frackville, Pennsylvania. And at that point in time, unemployment was off the chart. I mean, people were hanging out at the grocery stores. Yeah. It was really, really a difficult time. And, so I saw firsthand what was going on, at that point in time in that area of the country.
And that had to scare you a bit, being a 20-something-year-old. You're coming out and you're going, oh, my God, what's the future?
Yeah. Well, it did. And it was a real wake-up call. And I'll tell you one other story. So when I was working for McCormick, and this is I went up there behind a guy who had been there for 10, 15 years and decided he wasn't going to work anymore. McCormick found out he wasn't working. They fired him.
Oh, he didn't retire. He just didn't work.
They found out he wasn't working. So they let this guy go, but they didn't tell me that he had not serviced his accounts for well over several months. So here I am. I'm
You're
ready
bebopping in.
I got my sport coat on. I got my blue tie with ducks on it or whatever it might be. Pair of khakis and some loafers. And I walk into this store and I go, hi, this guy's name was Ciotti. I said, hi, I'm George Mullinix with McCormick and Company. Here to take care of your stuff for my spices and all that. And he looks at me and he goes, get the out of my store, and yells it 3 times, get out of the store. And of course I'm like shaking. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's going on? And that happened in a few places. So I learned, the value of taking care of your customers, because if you don't, you may have a very bad experience.
Isn't it funny how they send the new guy into the problem?
Yeah, they set me in.
And they don't tell you anything.
No. And I called up the lady that hired me. I said, hey, people up here are pretty mad. They're not happy. They're not happy with this company.
So after McCormick, you get your degree, you get on with Mars. And
right.
Where are you with Mars? In the Baltimore area?
Yeah, so I'm a sales rep in the Baltimore area. I have my territory is
well, that's got to be nirvana for you.
Yeah,
Isn't that
back
what you
home.
wanted?
I'm back home with my friends. We're going to Orioles games. I'm eating crabs. It's great. This life is good. And anyway, but I did well with them, and they recruited me up to their corporate office, and I became a brand manager working for a guy up in Hackettstown, New Jersey, and that's where my career just started to move, in a good direction. And so it was a great job. So my wife and I, we moved to Sparta, New Jersey, western part of the state, and we were there for a few years. Then they recruited me to go work in Chicago at their new ice cream facility. They were launching new ice cream products called Dove Bar, and they were doing it with Snickers and Milky Way and other brands of candy.
Dove Bars have done pretty well.
They did, and so that was one of my first jobs, was to be the marketing manager for Dove Bar.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it worked in my house.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so that was a great experience. I worked with them for 10 years. I loved the company. It was it was a great experience. I can't say enough good things about it.
How'd you get here? How'd you get to Chattanooga?
So anyway, the way I got here was I ended up working for Pillsbury, and my wife and I ended up moving to Pennsylvania and worked there in the pet food business. And then they recruited me to work at Pillsbury in Minneapolis. And so we went up to Minneapolis for a while. And when I was there, a guy called me up and said, "Do you want to come work for me as the vice president of marketing for Brock's in Chicago?" And so I took that job, and that took us to Chicago. And then
that's BRACH.
BRACH, yeah, the evil empire from the north.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were in a manufacturing facility where the costs were just way too high. We couldn't compete. And so the owner of the company purchased BROCK here in Chattanooga, and several of us moved here to Chattanooga. And I came here in 1995 with that transition and moved here with that company here.
Because you were living that corporate life, being moved around every 2 years, back and forth. Did Chattanooga give you some stability when you got here?
Yeah, I loved it. I fell in love with Chattanooga. When we came here, I remember I was at Miller and Martin meeting the Brock family, who I also can't say enough nice things about. Every single one of them. Just great guys, great people. Can't say enough nice things about them. And I had just left Chicago. They sent up their corporate jet to get us, and we left Chicago. It was 20 degrees on the tarmac in Chicago at Midway. Flew down here, got off. It was sunny and like 70, and it was green. And I called my wife. I said, "You will not believe Chattanooga. It is beautiful. This place is unbelievable. We're going to love it here." And we did. We fell in love with Chattanooga. We just absolutely fell in love with it. We fell in love with the way people tried to live Christ-like lives. We fell in love with the level of faith that people had in general. We fell in love with the just just the way people handled themselves here in the South, and of course the weather and the beautiful area that we're in. We just fell in love with it, and we just never wanted to leave.
And you got here really before the big transformation. I think the aquarium was either underway or already built when you got here, but the riverfront wasn't done, and Chattanooga still had a lot of challenges when you got here.
Yeah. But you know what? Compared to other places that I had been in around the country, I felt like it was just a gem. We moved to Signal Mountain, and every day I would drive down the mountain from Signal Mountain. I just would look out over the gorge and just think, boy, what a beautiful place. And I was so taken back by the courtesy, of people here in this area. It's a special place. I still feel that way too. I really do.
Yeah, and you've got the advantage of some comparisons of some places that you've lived, particularly up in the Northeast, in Chicago when it's 20 degrees.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I could just tell you stories of in business, and the grocery industry is a tough business, and I can just tell you walk into an office and you're in there presenting what it is you think you would like them to carry for you in the grocery stores. And they'll just you don't know what's going to happen sometimes. It can be, pretty intense, Down here, everybody's polite.
Yeah.
I always say to everybody, I'd say, if somebody says to you, I just think we're just going to pass on that right now. They're basically saying, we don't really like a whole lot that you have to offer.
But they did it politely.
But they say it so nice.
Yeah, and you feel good about it.
Yeah. But that's even said differently if you were in New Jersey or New York.
Oh yeah,
so
a little more blunt.
Very blunt. Yeah.
And you're right. Grocery business is a very tough business.
Yeah,
they're razor thin margins.
That's right.
and highly competitive, and a lot of people don't understand. It's basically a real estate business. You got to get your shelf space.
That's right. Yeah, exactly right.
So how long? You come down in '95 with Brock, and things are going well. Your family's enjoying the town, and what's next?
So it was in 2000 and I think it's 2003. They decided to move their offices to Texas, and they wanted me to move to Plano, Texas. And we'd been here 8-9 years. And my kids are in school here. They're doing great. I love this area. My wife loves this area.
Teenagers at this point?
Yeah, teenagers. And my daughter Kaylee's just getting into middle school. So I remember I said to them, we're going to move to Plano, Texas. And they're like devastated. My Kaylee's crying. We're in a restaurant.
You did it publicly. I like that.
Well, it was quiet. It was quiet, but she was crying, and I'm like, oh, this is awful. I mean, this is. So anyway, we're flying in, and the flight. You fly in. I would fly to Memphis, and then Memphis into DFW. When you fly in, there's no mountains. There's nothing green. There's like tumbleweeds, below you. And my kids are just like, they're just so devastated.
Why are we leaving?
Yeah, they're like, it's work. And so anyway, we go down there. We actually went to some schools and interviewed, blah, blah, blah. And then we went on a vacation, with the family, and I couldn't do it. I sat there. I was so upset about it because I thought, I'm 50 years old. If I don't go, they're going to probably fire me.
Yeah, it's really that decision that says, well, we got this guy's been with us a long time. He doesn't want to go.
He don't want to move.
So there's not a place for you
That's
anymore.
Right. So I said to I was really worried about it. It was very difficult. So I remember we were on a flight back. We were coming back from a vacation. I said to Cindy, we're not going to go. We're just not going to go. I'm not going to have our family have to move to Texas. I'm just not going to uproot the family.
And they probably would have adjusted over time, but what a big decision. How long a period did that go over that you were debating that back?
I probably a few weeks. They wanted me down there. I was doing everything they wanted me to do. I flew my family down there. We went to schools. All the things they wanted to see me do to make this transition eventually. And I told them. I said I can't move my family.
What'd they say?
Well, the guy I was working for said, you're going to be terminated, and you'll probably be terminated without any severance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I said...
And their argument being, we've offered you an opportunity. You're the one that decided you didn't want it.
Yeah, that was the first thing. You'll probably, you're going to be terminated, and you'll probably be terminated without any severance. And I said, okay, well, I understand, but I'm not moving my family. And so then they came back to me and said, well, how about this? Do you want to commute? And I said, yeah, I'll do that. So I commuted to Plano for 2 years. I was head of sales for the company. So I was flying all over the country for different things, different reasons.
You had to be on the road anyway.
I had to be on the road anyway. So I did that for 2 years. And then eventually we just parted ways.
Yeah.
And I parted ways with some severance, and I started looking for something to do here in Chattanooga.
You know, I compare that, or not compare that, but when I did the commuting back and forth to Montgomery, you know, my big realization was sitting in an apartment by myself when I'd be going Sunday through Friday down there and realizing I don't even want to be here. Why am I here? So I'm sure you had to have a lot of that.
Oh, it was tough.
Missing your family and everything.
Well, it was. I'd be on Sunday morning. I'd be up at 4:30 in the morning, 4 in the morning. I'd be at the airport in time for a 6 o'clock flight. I'd fly to Memphis. I'd change flights, fly to DFW, and I'd be in Plano at our office in time for the executive meeting at 10 o'clock their time. I did that every Monday morning for 2 years. And then after that, I would probably be taking a flight to somewhere else in the country and be involved with the sales force or the sales team, whatever it might be. And I'd be out. Then I'd come back. I'd come back on Friday.
Do you think that is a work ethic in the older boomer generation, or do you think everyone kind of looks like, oh, I'll just, you know, I'm going to do that now?
Yeah.
You know, not make my family sacrifice, but I'm going to have these personal sacrifices so my family can be where they want to be, and I'll get on the plane and I'll do that. Do you think that's more common?
For the boomer generation?
Yeah.
I don't really know. I know that during that time, it was not, you know, everybody that was in that game, let's say, and working for corporate America. And I'd worked with a few companies. It was just the way it was.
Yeah, you went where the job was, even if you didn't like the town.
And it was expected. Yeah. I mean, it was, you know, I think the company cultures today have changed as well.
Yeah.
But back then, the cultures were demanding. Mm-hmm. You know, if you want this level of responsibility, and you're going to be paid this amount of money, you're going to give 110%. They're not going to tell you that. And if in fact you're not, and the numbers aren't where they need to be, more than likely we'll find somebody to replace you. That's how I would look at it, looking back on it.
Yeah.
And I think you just knew you were always replaceable, and you had to achieve results.
And I think that's an important point, and it comes a bigger realization as you get older and in that career a longer time.
Yeah.
So you're 50, and this is presented to you, and you're deciding. You decide to stay in Chattanooga. I'm not going to go. You're leaving Brock and Brock. Mm-hmm. What do you do now?
So I started looking for things to do. I started networking. With people here in town, people I'd never met before.
How'd you go about that?
I started with people I knew in my church up on Signal Mountain, and they'd say, you probably want to talk to this guy. So I'd call them up and talk to them, and what about this guy? And I started looking at franchises. I just started looking for things that I thought I might enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and as it turns out, a guy that I knew from my church said, you probably want to talk to this guy, Joe Moan. He owns this publishing company, and he's getting ready to retire. He wants to sell his business. And so I went and met Joe and Billy Moan, and they showed me their magazines. And I thought, well, I think I can do this. You know, I was doing marketing and sales, so I think I can do this. But I thought, you know, I don't really know if I feel like selling ads, though.
And you had no journalism background.
Yeah, so you know, I'm thinking, you know, I don't know if I want to do that. I mean,
isn't that a weird feeling? You're coming out of corporate America doing this one thing, and all of a sudden these other ideas are being thrown to you as well. Maybe you can do this. And I'll just relate it to my own journey, you know, because I went through a similar thing of looking at franchises. And I remember the franchise guy telling me that there's a specialty glass company that the guy's wanting to retire. And I'm like, I've broken every glass I've ever been around. And I even went to watch them cut glass one day. And that's when I knew, no, I can't do that. So I'm sure it had to be something similar along those lines.
Well, I looked at a sign company one time, and the sign company has these big bucket lifts that take you up 50 feet, when you put signs on it. And my wife said to me, "You're not buying this company because you can't use a hammer, much less a 50-foot bucket. You'll kill yourself."
Oh, that's so true. But you're looking at things because you've still got to make a living. You still got to provide.
I got 3 kids in school at the time. I mean, they're in school.
Was it more important to you what you do, or the fact that it was a good, viable business? So, because there's some things that you're looking at, I just can't do that. I can't get excited about getting up every morning and selling a widget. Yeah.
So all that was important to me. I felt like I wanted to feel like my skills matched up well with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the other thing was the amount of investment I'd have to make that basically I was putting on the line with the potential of it not working out.
Yeah.
And what I thought, can I make it work? And what I saw when Joe and Billy Moan showed me their magazines, crazy as it sounds, but when we were in the ice cream business, we were always talking about the highest quality premium prices. We charge premium prices for high quality. And I learned along the way that, there's a place in every category for the highest quality product, period, over and out. You look at any category that's out there, there's somebody that's got the top spot in terms of quality. They're a little bit higher in price, but they have a niche, and the profit margins are good because of that. And so I looked at what they had to offer, and I thought, you know what? I think I understand this business. I think I know what I would do if I did buy this business, and how I would go about doing it. And so that's when I decided to buy it.
So you were able to apply your background in marketing and everything and say, I may not know publishing, but I do know the marketing aspect that these things are here.
Yeah.
And it's a premium product.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when I started going out and meeting customers, it was funny, they would pick up like Cityscope magazine or Healthscope magazine, and I would watch them hold it.
Yeah.
And we had a real glossy cover, which we still have today, which is far more expensive to have on a publication. And they would hold it, and they would rub, they would hold their hands over it, and they would feel the texture. And then some people would open up and smell it. And I thought to myself, this is an experience. This is not about just a magazine. This is about an experience. You have to have content that makes people feel upbeat and happy, and it's beautiful, and it's made with paper that's not the norm, and it makes you look at it and say, this is really something special. And then tell the stories of the people in your community, like you do.
Yeah.
Tell the stories of the people in the community, and just make sure everybody feels good about their experience in the magazine.
Wait, what year did you buy the magazine?
It was 2007 we started.
Oh, right in time for a recession.
Oh, yeah, exactly right.
So what were those first years like building it? You got a family of teenagers and growing, and you're in a new industry.
Yeah.
I could see why you don't need caffeine. Because you're up going, I got to make this thing work.
That's right. So one of the things that I always reflect back on, and I know you can appreciate this, is so I buy the business. I'm sitting in there as my wife and I. We have maybe an intern, and I'm sitting at this old beat up desk with an old beat up phone, and I say to myself, I got to start calling people.
Yeah.
So I'm calling people up and I'm saying, hi, this is George Mullinix with Cityscope and Healthscope magazines, and they're like, who?
Yeah.
I said, George Mullinix, it's George Mullinix, Cityscope and Healthscope magazines. You have a minute? Yeah, sure. So, nobody knows me. And it's funny, one point in time I was a Gold Club member on American, Gold Club American on Delta, Golden Hertz. I could go to any of these different clubs in the airports and drink as much wine as I wanted.
Yeah.
Or, snack on whatever they had. It was just like, And I looked at those cards, and I'd say one by one they went out of date. I was like, you know what? No more. This is the real deal.
Well, and that's, at least to me, the interesting thing of having been on that corporate path, and all of a sudden you get out on your own. Because on your corporate path, you start with all that grunt work originally, and you're growing your credibility, you're getting more responsibility, but you don't have to do all those things. And then you go work for yourself, and the copy machine jams, and you're going,
That's right.
Where's the copy guy?
I know. It's exactly right. So it's all hands on deck, and it was a huge transformation. But like you just said, I just thought to myself, I got I've got no choice. I'm in this thing. I got to make it work. But one by one, I met people in this community and built relationships. And they would talk to me about I would talk to them about what I wanted, what I was going to do with the publication, what my vision was for the publication, and how I would always be true and honest with them. They could always count on me to do the right thing for them. And one by one, I built relationships in the community. And today I value them, beyond what you could ever imagine.
We've talked to a lot of people, and probably the number one thing of successful people is relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
And you know what? When you're in the ivory tower, you never really get to that. And you work for a big company, it's probably unlikely you'll ever have that same experience in terms of building relationships that involve one business to another business at the ground level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you personally are with them to see how they're doing, and you understand their families, and you understand what they've been through, and how you've been a part of whatever you've done to help them in whatever way that might be.
Yeah. I want to get to a couple more things before we run out of time. One is, what was the turning point for you that you looked and said, yeah, this is going to work for us?
I think the biggest turning point for me, I'll never forget this, was I went to CHI Memorial, and they committed to work with me for the whole year. And I thought to myself, I'm getting there.
Yeah,
I'm getting there.
You got a long-term contract.
I've got, they've made a commitment to me for a year, and I never had that before. And I thought, I'm getting there now. We're starting to make progress to the extent that people trust me and they believe in me. They've heard what I had to say, and they saw what I did, and they trust me. And I think a lot of people don't realize, but in a business, how you move forward in terms of your ability to succeed not only has to do with having a really great product and the way your people treat, your customers and all that, but you have to have the ability to establish trust.
Huge.
If somebody's going to invest this amount of money with you, you better deliver on what you've told them. And if you don't, you're never going to have them again. And that's a huge difference between a lot of businesses today. It's just the ability to do what you say you're going to do and always be honest and transparent and treat them like you'd want to be treated.
How difficult was it for you being a corporate guy on the road, but living in Chattanooga, because you're not here most of the week when you're on the road, coming back and starting a business where people really don't know you unless they're at the airport with you?
They didn't know me at all. As a matter of fact, there's more than one occasion somebody would say to me, I'd call on the person responsible for the ads, and they'd say, so tell me, how long have you been working for Cityscope?
As of this morning?
And I never went into that. I just said, well, I've been doing it now for about a year or so.
Yeah.
And then the next time I'd come back and the person would say to me, hey, tell me, do you own that company? And I'd say, yeah. And they'd go, what are you doing out here doing this? I'm like, I'm trying to make the business successful.
Yeah. Where do you see the magazines going in the next decade?
Gosh, I think the whole thing is the ability to connect with the community, period, over and out. You need to tell the stories. You need to be just involved, very, very intimately with the community and be a great reflection of that community and create a product that people, enjoy, whether it be HealthScope magazine or Cityscope magazine or Choose Chattanooga, that they find to be informative or enjoyable and is a tremendous reflection of this community.
You know what they'd enjoy? A magazine with me on the cover.
I'm sure you're right.
Yeah.
I think our
you might sell two maybe to my wife. Maybe. All right. Before I get to the last question, George, I want to remind our listeners who makes all this possible. It's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do good here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. George, you've had a fascinating career, but I want you to go back to your 25-year-old self. What would you tell that 25-year-old George Mullinax is important for a happy life?
I would, for a happy life, I would say do what you enjoy and enjoy the journey. And there's going to be ups and downs, but along the way things work out.
Yeah,
and just enjoy the journey.
Yeah, and I look at your story. Those hard decisions that you had to make were family based. You did what was best for your family.
I think in the end of the day, looking back on it, I would say that's pretty much what I did. Yeah.
Yeah. It's worked out well.
It's worked out. And I'm so grateful that we're here in Chattanooga, and I've raised, our 3 kids here. We have 6 grandchildren.
Wow, you're up to 6.
6 grandchildren, and I'm enormously proud of all of them, and I'm so grateful for my wife, Cindy. She's been just an amazing partner for me over the years, and we've been married for 42 years now. It's been just a heck of a ride.
Could you envision playing with your grandkids in your house in Plano, or would you rather?
No.
Well, we're glad you're here. And speaking of relationships, I've been able to have a relationship with you over the years, and I greatly appreciate you've always been good to me, and I appreciate your friendship.
Well, same here, Mike, and it's been a privilege to be on this with you. It's an incredible podcast, and I'm so honored to be here and to be with you.
Well, thank you, George. It's great to see you. Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.